Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of DIY Investing Education. And in last episode, we talked about what is a dividend stock versus a growth stock. So it's only fitting we're going to continue in the next couple of episodes talking about what you need to know about dividend stocks. The first thing is dividend yield. You might have heard that expression before. So what is dividend yield and how do you calculate it? Well, dividend yield is expressed in a percentage. Just like it says here for TD Bank. By the way, we're going to use TD Bank as an example and some ETF examples as well. So you see TD Bank right now on investing.com, and by the way, I'm filming this on June the 3rd, has a dividend yield of 4.42%. So what does that mean and how do you calculate that? Let's go through it together. So yield is typically expressed in a percentage form annually. So you could kind of think of yield or dividend yield as an annual interest rate. And it's really based on two very important factors: the annual dividend rate. Okay, so the annual dividend rate is a dollar amount and it's per share, and the stock price as well. Those are the two things you need to calculate the dividend yield. So TD Bank, as of June 3rd today, the market's still open, by the way, so we'll just take $95.91 as the current stock price. And if we look at, you have to have the current dividend rate of the stock or ETF. So right now, the current dividend rate for TD is $1.05 quarterly. That's quarterly. So typically dividends are given out quarterly or monthly. So in case, for TD, the example of TD stock, it's quarterly. So $1.05, that's actually, I guess you could say, the quarterly dividend rate. So if you do 1.05 times 4, you'll get the annual dividend rate. So the annual dividend rate currently of TD, remember that could change. You could see that the dividend rates do change. So you got to make sure you have the right current dividend rate. It's $4.02. That's per share, and that's on an annual basis. So all you have to do to find out what the current dividend yield is based on the current stock price, which means what is the annual yield that you'll get right now if you buy TD stock right now. You have to do 4.2 divided by the stock price, 95.91, and then you could do times 100. So again, it's the annual dividend rate, that's a dollar amount, divided by the stock price times 100. That will give you your yield of 4.37 blah 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 percent, and you could see it's very close to the 4.42. My assumption is that this 4.42 is probably based on yesterday's closing stock price, most likely, right? So that is how you calculate the annual dividend yield of a stock. And by the way, the same thing goes for an ETF. Let's check out a few ETFs together. This is the Global X S&P TSX 60 Index ETF, CNDX. So it actually says the annual distribution yield right here, the annual dividend yield. And by the way, if you're wondering what is distribution yield versus dividend yield, what is a distribution versus a dividend, that's actually going to be covered in the next episode. So you'll find out what the difference is between a dividend and a distribution. So CNDX, we need to find, of course, the annual dividend rate per share. So if we go to distributions, at the bottom, you'll see here that the current distribution, or the first one for 2025, is 21.4 cents, and it's quarterly. So again, we have to times that by 4 to get the annual. So 21.4 cents times 4 is 85.6 cents. So if we divide that by yesterday's closing price, which is $29.68. So we just divide that by $29.68 times 100, and you'll get 2.88. That's how they have the 2.88 here, right? So that is another example, and we'll just do a final example where there is a monthly distribution. This is USCL. This is the Global X Enhanced S&P 500 Covered Call ETF, and pretty much all of Global X Canada's Covered Call ETFs have a monthly distribution. So again, we have to look at what is the current monthly distribution. Right now it's 25.5 cents. So you do 25.5 times 12 instead of times 4, obviously, because this is monthly and there's 12 months in a year. So 3.06 is the current annual dividend rate. And if we divide that by yesterday's closing price of 21.17, you'll see right there, times 100, 14.45, 14.45 it matches. So in summary, everyone, the annual dividend rate is pretty much referring to, it's a percentage, it's an annual percentage, and you could kind of think of it like an annual interest rate. And it's really you need two things to calculate it. It's based on two factors: the annual dividend rate. Again, annual dividend rate, this is a dollar amount per share. So if it's quarterly, you see the quarterly one, you got to multiply it by 4 to get the annual. If it's monthly, you got to multiply by 12 to get the annual. And then you do divided by the current stock price times 100 to get your annual dividend yield or distribution yield. And that's going to be based on the stock price, on the current stock price. Remember, what could change the annual distribution yield? They pretty much change every day. The stock prices go up and down every day. So of course, the calculation is going to be a little bit different and the yield is going to be a bit different every day. But you always need two things: the annual distribution or dividend rate, and then you divide that by the stock price. And remember, if you buy, let's say you buy, the current dividend rate that we calculated for TD, that is the rate or your annual dividend rate if you buy it at 95.91, right? So it was 1.05 times 4. But let's say TD Bank stock goes to $100. Well, the annual dividend rate is going to be less because the stock price is different. So it's 4.2 divided by 100 times 100. And that's 4.2. So it's a little bit lower than the current dividend rate of 4 point whatever it was. So there you have it, everyone. Again, to calculate it yourself, you need the annual dividend rate per share, divide that by the stock price times 100, and you're basically simulating your annual yield based on that stock price. And of course, that changes up or down. Give me a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Make sure you send this episode to your friends or family that are beginning to invest, especially if they're interested in dividend stocks, because this is a very important concept to understand. In the next episode, we're going to discuss what is the difference between a dividend and a distribution. So stay tuned and see you next time.